life after loss is not easy, but with a new perspective, you can give yourself permission to live again. Hello, my name is Dakota Kimball, and I welcome you to my podcast, A Widow's Perspective. Welcome to A Widow's Perspective. My name is Dakota Kimball, and I am the host. Today, I am happy to have Miss Ashley Wood, who I have known forever as a guest. So Ashley is an intergenerational catalyst, a forgiveness revolutionary, a transparent conversationalist. Ashley Wood is the creator and founder of This Life is Ghetto series. Ashley has a passion for creating intentional and safe platforms for transformative encounters. Through real-life experiences and relational connections, her work is engaging and relatable with a touch of humor. Ashley co-authored her first book, This Life is Ghetto, a candid conversation between the father and adult daughter navigating divorce and daddy issues with her father, Louis E. Wood, sharing the full circle of healing and repair of their relationship. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And I am so happy that you said yes to this conversation, which is an important conversation.
Absolutely.
I want to first start out by saying, so generally when you hear conversations of conflict, it's generally one-sided.
Right.
But you and your dad did something different. You shared both of your stories, your perspectives. So I want to ask you, what inspired you and your dad to write this book?
Yes, so initially it started with an instruction from God, write the book. I didn't know what book, what I was writing about. I just knew that was the directive. So after partnering with my writing coach and really thinking through and praying like, okay, what am I writing about? I decided to focus on the relationship between my father and I, and having conversations with a lot of my friends, even males and females who have experienced their parents divorcing as adults. There's not a lot of dialogue around it. We have self-help books, we have groups for children, but there's not a lot of conversation around how it impacts adult children. And so I wanted to focus on that. And then even the females or the daughters who are still dealing with daddy issues, right? You have some who are just struggling on how to forgive, what that looks like, where to start. So I wanted to write about that, and I was like, okay, God, are we in the right place? So I reached out to my dad and I said, would you be interested? I just want to interview, ask some questions. He said, sure, whatever you want to know. So initially it started off with just my perspective, but I was going to incorporate his, and I said, as I was editing, why not make this a dialogue? And so I said, would you be interested in co-authoring it with me? Because I think the voice of a man, the voice of a father is so important and is missing. So I thought that would be a great segue or even an opportunity to give voice to men.
So like I said before, what's interesting is you generally hear one perspective of the conversation. But from reading the book, it appears that you both were very intentional with not only sharing your perspective, but wanting to healing as the ultimate goal.
Absolutely.
Was that the intention?
Yes. I didn't know what I was going to learn when I asked the questions. But as we were conversing, I had a few moments like, say what now? You did what? But it was healing for me as an adult, because some of the questions I asked when I was a teenager, I talk about it in the book, he wasn't able to answer me. So for me, that teenage or that young adult woman, I was able to revisit that time where my father couldn't answer the questions that I needed. But now he's in a state where he's better, he's healed more, and he can say, hey, I did this, this is why, and I want to help you, like whatever you want to know. And so for me, it was helpful because now I had a father who could share and was comfortable sharing, right? And I think a lot of times, especially in Black families, our parents are so conditioned, either I'm not going to share, I don't want to talk about it, or I don't even know how to talk about it with you. But to have that open dialogue and to understand why he made the decisions that he did, why he did what he did. He had his own issues, and sometimes if we only look through our lens, we think we're the only ones that have problems, or I'm going to blame you. But they have their own story, they had their own issues, and so to hear more of his childhood, what he experienced, I began to connect the dots, and it's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
And I think what's important about that is, and you address it in your book when you're talking about foundation, that we don't, so we are generally how we're brought up. Good, bad, indifferent, whatever, but that formalizes or shapes us being a person. So, of course, as a teenage girl, you didn't know your father's foundation.
Just a little bit, but
right. So when you're as a child, when you're looking at your relationship with your dad, of course, in that moment, I'm sure we're not the psychology of it. As a child, you're not thinking of that. You're thinking as a child what your relationship should be with your father. So do you remember as a child what you thought you wanted from your father, or how that relationship should look?
I think it was more from an innocent child's perspective. So and you probably can attest to this, when you're coming up, either your dad can do no wrong, or it's, my dad has always been this big man, so it's, hey. And I don't recall like always being like a true daddy's girl, but in the early years of being a teenager, we were really close. But I think my mom did a great job of shielding from what was happening. So it's good and bad, but I just saw him as my father, right? And I think even as I began to write and God was even working on me even more, it was the innocence of it. Once you lose it, that's when the issues come. And so if there was a perspective where I still saw him through God's lens, God's love, then I think the innocence would have remained, or my admiration of him would have remained. But once you bring in you start seeing them for who they are, then you begin to judge, and then all the things that happen in life. And so that's where that domino effect. But growing up, he was just my dad. He was a preacher, pastor, whatever, but I still saw him as my father. It was not until going into the teenage years, and my mom, she began to, just tell me a little bit more, and I began to see for myself. It was like, oh, this is what life really is.
Right.
So, but I think that's where that disconnect started happening, when I saw him for the human that he was.
Okay. And it's generally the humanist part.
That's what gets us.
That gets us, right? Absolutely. So there then became a time that you talk about in the book that your dad left. And you also talked about when he left your mother, pretty much he left you, that he wasn't able to figure out the two relationships, which happens. And I think that was I think that's what drew me in also, because people don't know how to disconnect. Can you discuss a little bit how that made you feel?
Yes. So then, not knowing what I know now, I could understand. So my mother and I have always been close. And so leading up into the years before he left the first time, we had to stick together. And so it was, okay, she said, I got to get you off to school. You need to graduate high school. So it was just by any means necessary. So there was a certain bond, but we just had to focus on surviving, right? And so I think with my father identifying that and the insecurities that he was dealing with, it was, I don't know how to come to my daughter because she's so close to her mom. I don't know what to say to you, right? And so with him telling me later, I felt like your brothers didn't judge me. So he felt like I was going to judge him because I was so closely related to the issue, right?
Okay.
But it was really tough. And then to look around and see the dynamic between my friends and their fathers, and it's like, you know, and you're looking at him as, okay, you're this man of God. You used to be a pastor. You're a preacher. Like, I'm trying to understand what, and then to realize, oh, you're still maintaining communication with my brothers. Like, what about me? So you're just going through all of those questions. And so I went through a wave of just like anger, disappointment. Then I became numb, right? And you just get used to, okay, I won't hear from them, right? So you go through all of these, but there was no communication. So I was left to make up my own story.
Which happens.
Yeah. And it's probably 90% not true, whatever's going on in your mind. And so that's why we were drilling down the communication piece. It all just starts with just one conversation.
And how, because you said your dad was a pastor, so how did that affect you? Because it's not only that you're my father, but you are a man of God. You were my pastor. So how much, or did that impact even more, or?
It did, because I placed a religious expectation on him, right? So when we do that, when we place labels on people, I don't care if they're the pastor, the deacon, whatever in a church organization, at the end of the day, they're still a man. So the mistake I had on my end was I'm still judging you from a lens of a title, not from the man that you are. But if I'm young, I don't know, but still had I applied the word, so I had to take accountability for that. And we expect people to give us grace, but we don't do well in giving others grace.
We don't give no grace. We don't give people.
And I'm going to hold it against you, and I'm going to hold this grudge as long. But we're the ones in error. And so God had to highlight that, where, no, you were looking at him according to what you thought he should be, what society said he should be, in the era of a title. But I didn't get a chance, or I didn't make the opportunity to just love him as a daughter, right? It was always an expectation of, what are you going to do? We need this. But I didn't approach her from that human aspect. And I think that's, if we can focus more on that, even with our young daughters, young sons, from that God's love. And so that's why I highlight that in the book on what love is according to scripture, not what we say.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to go back to 1 Corinthians. You have to, because that is the true definition of love. So what's interesting is, so you write this book as an adult, that this happened as you were leaving your teen years into your young adult years. Now, the thing that I don't think parents realize is, most parents tell their kids at 18, you out of the house, you blah, blah, blah. Most people don't realize the kids still need their parent. So when you discuss navigating life without your father in those years, how did that, and you do a great job talking about it, how did that affect your other relationships?
It impacted it. So one, of course, I started dating in college. I didn't know what I was doing, you know. But I talk about
nobody knows what they doing in college.
Like, oh, I gotta be kind to you, you know. So I talk about that. Like, I realized, oh, I have to be nice. We have to communicate.
Right.
So leading up into that, you know, dating wasn't a big thing in our family. And I just said, I told I'm just gonna wait till I go to college. I'm not even gonna worry about dating now, because you two, the way you even interview or interrogate a prom date, yeah, I'm good. So I went in, I just didn't know. So when yes, I saw a union, I saw a marriage, and I've seen healthy, you know, relationships, But now you're in it, and there's nothing like being in it to understand. Okay, so I think dating started off rocky for me because I came in with walls. I came in with the attitude. I wasn't used to communicating because I was in a state of shutting down. So it's only so much you were going to get in, right? And there was a level of vulnerability. So that was new. But how I saw men was a little skewed. So it was, I'm not sure how legit you're going to be. It's college, so you just don't have high expectations of men. I will say with friendships, of course, you know, your sister is one of my best friends. I didn't have a huge pool of friends. I had my starting five, and then but I built a lot of relationships in college. But I found then, even with that gap, I assessed relationships a little differently. I have to ease in. We gotta test this thing a little bit. So it impacts how you trust. It impacts how you communicate. It impacts what you show others. So even my college classmates that read the book, they said, "Ashley, we had no idea." I said, "Because I didn't share it." You know, people knew my parents were separated, but they didn't know the extent of what was going on. And so I think also it prevents you from being yourself 100% because you have, you know, all these walls. It eventually is going to translate into other things. And so I find that I wasn't able to be 100%, although I was operating as myself. I was just operating in survival. And so when you're only operating in survival, you're not fully free. And then when you're just carrying around unforgiveness, you're not free. Right.
Got you. Yeah, and that's true. That is true. You're still bound. Yeah, in that mindset. So you say that your dad told you men lie.
Yep.
And you said that a couple of times throughout the book. Your father says, and the thing that I also loved about the book was at the end when you do the letter to daughter and letter. Yeah, that was so. I think what it was when you listen sometimes to podcasts or conversations, people are so focused on blaming. And regurgitating their hurt. And I'm not saying the hurt is not real. I don't think it's not justified to a certain point. But at some point, as you do so well in the book, you talk about healing. And you have to make that choice to heal. So in your father's letter, he says, men lie, but I should have told you this. And what did he tell you?
It was a combination of things. In our conversations, even since we were writing the book, it was the why behind it. But there was an unspoken why when he told me his story. So they lie. That's all I heard. They lie. They lie. If you think you like a boy, they lie. And so I think that's also what impacted that relationship, because at the back of my mind, I'm hearing my dad say, "You gonna end up lying," which is probably true, but there's a reason why. And so I think if there had been more of a focus of, here's how men are wired, here's what we need. Like he mentioned that I should have told you what we need, how we like to be loved, the vulnerable side. And so had that been, you know, you just can't, they lie, period. So you go in thinking, yeah, this is going to be a crash and burn situation. But I think for women and men, like daughters, and we need more of the why. And I think that's what has impacted a lot of us, even now, my generation, your generation, our parents' generation. There wasn't a lot of conversation around that. It was just, this is what it is. How about don't ask any questions? Right. You know, we weren't allowed to ask the why. I was talking back. So you're left to fill in the blanks. But had we known more of the story, if I had known what my dad went through, then I could have assessed a little better. And we joked about it. I said, you had the whole playbook of, of this dating thing. Like, I could have dodged a whole lot of men. Like, you had all this in your pocket. But I think that's the other piece that's important.
Right.
And we always focus more on what you shouldn't do, but we don't highlight what you should do.
Right.
Like, what are the great attributes? What should I be looking for? So if I'm looking for the positive, the negative is going to stand out. But I think with parents, even with what we do, we always communicate, don't do this.
Right.
Don't have sex.
Yes.
Don't get pregnant.
Yes.
Don't do this.
Yes.
And it's like, but you're not telling me why.
Right.
And so with some of it, a lot of it is biblical principles. So if you direct me back to the word, okay, I understand. But don't just tell me what not to do.
Right.
Tell me what to do so I can highlight whatever is the counterfeit.
Right. And I think for you to be able to now be in a position to understand what your dad went through, because we forget, right, as kids, we forget, number one, that they're human, and we don't always process the generation that they grew up in, because of course it's a different generation than what we live now. And like you said, there were unspoken rules that they abided by, and back then there were no whys, because to be honest, the parents didn't have time to do it.
They didn't have
because
time to
of the
explain.
life, because of the life, what was going on in their lives at that particular time. It was survival mode, and I think what is unfortunate for us is that we continue to teach survival mode instead of, all right, this is enough. Now you can live, and I think that's what your book, the end message is too. That you have to heal, you have to forgive, and you have to live. And those are three things. But you can't do it if you're still holding on, if you're not acknowledging what the issues are, and then you're still holding on to it once you identify. So I highlighted an area. It was your father's note to my daughter, and it's under the chapter What We Should Have Said. And your father says, I wish I have dedicated more time to educating you on how to love a man. I emphasized that men lied, but I didn't emphasize why. I didn't emphasize who they truly are and what they need from a woman. We need a tender side from a woman, even while she's being strong. A lot of men will not admit this, but there will come a time when he will want to lay his head on his woman's bosom and just cry. He will want or need to be held by her, to find a safe place, to let him know, I got you, baby. Every man wants this from his woman. She doesn't even have to say anything. Just be present. Yes, we're all macho, but we're dying on the inside. That spoke to me because earlier your dad had said in the book, no one asked him how he was doing. And that was emotional to me because it made me think, did I ask my father at times when, things weren't good, how he was doing? Because we women do not realize that that's what a man needs. And how did you feel hearing this, reading this? How did that make you feel?
It made me do an evaluation and even go back, like, make sense. And these are things that I've learned just with dating as an adult, right? Learning more about men, having conversations with them. And my dad reiterated, even not included in the chapter, he said, even as we share, even as we're vulnerable, we don't need you to go and expose what we told you. Right? And so creating the space. And that's why I mentioned, even with some prior men that I dated, did I create enough of a safe space? But I didn't know how to, because learning it. But it makes sense with our fathers as well. And so that's where I had to apologize to him. As a daughter, I'm sorry I didn't make it easy for you even to, of course you're not going to lay on my bosom, but just to be in like, if we just needed to go chat, father to daughter, here's how I feel as your dad. Here's what I want to do for you. I can't. I'm sorry. I was like, I'm sorry if I didn't create that opportunity for you. Not that it would all fall on me, but if that's what he needed, and that's what most men need, I apologize. But with that, God even began to deal with me as our posture towards him, as our spiritual father. And so had that been more solid, I could have loved my father better. I could have created that space. But I was in this selfish stance where it was about me. And that's where I go back to God's love and even being secure as his daughter, right? So I was God's daughter first before I was Lewis's daughter. And so if we approach our relationships, even our relationships with our father, if they're no longer here, just understanding that still at the end of the day, I was formed in love. God he intentionally made us in love. And if we operate according to the love attributes, the gifts of the Spirit, then that will translate over into a relationship, even if it's just father-daughter or a romantic relationship. So I think that's why I say it comes back to that foundation. And so going back, I just had to apologize to him. So I said, now in this stage, as we are older, here's what we're going to do for each other. And so I know many thought they don't have that chance or opportunity, to make it right. So I said, while I still have that chance, this is what we're going to do going forward.
And I think one of the things you brought up, so the Bible is very clear on how we should treat one another, right? And sometimes we go out of the way to treat other people that way, but we don't treat the people close to us that way. The other thing that in saying everything that you're saying, some people would say, well, yes, she forgives her father, but it was his responsibility. I was thinking about, did you see the movie Claudine? Have you ever seen Claudine?
It's been a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite movies.
Oh,
That's
okay,
number one. Number two, in one of the scenes, it's when he disappears. When he disappeared when they're supposed to get married, and then when they come back together, I think he got an order to pay child support or whatever, and he was talking about the responsibility. And I don't think in this conversation we're excusing the roles of a parent, because it goes for a mother too.
Right.
Clearly, if we are creating children, bringing children into the world, there's a responsibility for us to take care of those kids. But it's not that simple. That there are things sometimes out of our control that prevents those things from happening. And when those uncontrollables happen, how people react to that. So your father, he was very honest in saying he just didn't know how, because this was expected of him. He couldn't meet that expectation, and this was his response.
Yes.
As a child, when you were younger, clearly you didn't see that.
Right.
You didn't understand it. But now, as the adult on the other side, how did that resonate with you?
It resonates with me that I am more empathetic towards parents. It doesn't even have to just be my parents, right? But for me, it causes, since I'm not a parent yet, even being intentional of who I procreate with. Am I ready? What am I instilling? Are there some things that I need? There are. Like, God is still working with me. So now that I got all this material, okay. I got, it's now, what are you going to do with the information? So I see fathers from a different lens now. I see daughters from a different lens. Now, when I have conversations, because I have all this intel and information, they act that way for a reason. Have you asked them? And now the next relationship I go into, I'm going to go in just from a different stance. And still, what helped with all that he told me, because I didn't even include everything that he shared, I still see him through the lens of God. Like, I still love you with God's love. So the worst he told me, it wasn't as shocking as it would have been in my younger years. And so it also helps you just with the grace we give towards others. And now I have a responsibility. So I can't say I don't know.
Right.
I can't say that I'm going to make it up as I go. No. So I'm more intentional now in relationships. I'm more intentional now in how I approach both my parents. And they're both at the point where they just continue to share things with me about what they went through. So now I know I can do better, or just grab whatever the good or bad of it and you know, and move forward with it. So now that I have more information, I have more context.
Got you. And when we talk about there was a difference in upbringing between your mom and your dad that your dad points out, and he also, by pointing it out, also showed the conversation we have now about men's mental health, which they didn't have back then. They just repeated the cycle, whatever they saw. But the difference in upbringing, your mom's family was more family oriented. It appears his family was more survival mode and getting used to that. So do you think, hearing what your dad said, for you when you're thinking about dating, do you think that would lean any one way if someone came from family, if somebody didn't know how to respond to family?
Yes, there's some questions to ask, right?
Yeah.
So if he doesn't come from a big family, or he's not family oriented, there might be a cautious pause. Let's talk through it. I'm not going to try to change you, but I need to see how you operate in certain situations. So also with him sharing that and my family reading it, they were able to understand my dad better from my mom's side of the family. And so it actually helped with some healing there and some question marks, or why he was aloof in some situations. So with my family reading it, outside of our immediate family, it helped them see my dad in a better light. They didn't know that's what was happening. So he was self-sabotaging. Like, so that's the other end. Even if they don't come from a big family, is that what you want? Are you willing to be a part of something that's more family oriented? So that's the other piece. But now I would have pause and ask some intentional questions.
Wow. You have to the father from a daughter. That was your letter to the father. How important was that to you to write that?
It was because I have quite a few friends and know quite a few females who have either lost their fathers or their fathers are here and they just can't give them what they need. And a lot of females are operating from that place of void where they just want to know, can you at least tell me you love me? Can you validate? Can you affirm me? And so I wanted daughters to know, whether you get what you need from them or not, you are still seen, you're still loved, you're still valuable. And so I just want daughters who are like me to know you're not out here by yourself. And I think society has placed this highlight on we have to be strong and you know, and now people are in this I'm independent and they're hurting. But to know that there are people who look like us that have been through some things. You may not look like it, but you've been through some things. But just to remind daughters, your love. But if you have the opportunity and you're still carrying the grudge and you say you are a believer, like I got to focus on, you know, with that piece. If you say you love God and you're a believer, this is actually, this is the non-negotiable.
Absolutely.
So you have to forgive. Right. And I've heard so many, I will never forgive my father. Tomorrow isn't promised. Yeah. And it's a duty. So if you choose not to forgive, that's great. But then God says, I'm not going to forgive you. Right, right. So you walking around and not taking advantage of mercy we were given. Right. Right. And so just highlighting, we can't puff it and we say, no, I love God and I want you doing everything else, but you not even do one key thing where he said forgive. Yeah. And so just going back to the basic of you have to let it go.
And I think what's interesting that you brought up a great point, that we think as believers, when we have those areas in our life, especially when you're dealing with family, that it's okay, I don't have to forgive them, but you're a believer, and God does not qualify that forgiveness.
He didn't give us any exception clauses.
No, there's none. So you have to, and some people feel, well, I'm the child, and it doesn't matter once you know. You have to make it right from your perspective. If you reach out, they don't reach back out to you, or they unfortunately reject you again, you've done your part.
Done your part.
Then that's not on you. That's on them. And you made it a point also to say that you have to be intentional on your healing and forgiveness. I think some people think it happens by osmosis, and it does not. It's something that you have to work on, right? And is healing easy? Is that process easy? It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but it's saying, however small or big, because I know some females, they've gone through some really bad things, but there's nothing that's so out there so bad that God can't handle. So it's once you say, I forgive, I release it, it's like, God, I need you to heal that area. So you then have to be intentional of the healer, allowing him to heal those places. We try to do it on our own. That's why we fail. Exactly. And we end up regressing, right? But it's, I got to go back to my Heavenly Father who created me. He knew the parents he gave me. I didn't ask to be here. That's what I didn't ask to be here. But now that I've released it, I need you to help me in that area. So we also have to be intentional in the vulnerability with God as we are with man.
And you had mentioned in the book how your relationship with your dad, what was funny is I was reading the book before I got to that part, my thought was, when people relationship with their earthly dad is not correct, it affects their relationship with our Heavenly Father. And then I get to the part that you bring that up. And how was that for you?
It was eye-opening. It was like a, oh, you get me together real nice kind of thing. And even now, God is still, he's having to undo, because you get in this pattern. So I now have to be intentional of, you know what? Even if I make a mistake, if there's something that happens, I still got to go back to you. Like, there is nothing that I have to withhold from you. And allowing God to love me from the lens of a father again. Like, to heal those places. And so it's at a point where even if my father can't do anything else, whatever happens, I'm still solid on the spiritual father that created me. And if we get that stance, like I've been now big on my posture and my protection as God's daughter. Like, he sees me as something that's peculiar and special. He made me with intentionality. He made me for good works. So even if man lets me down, I still have an assurance. And so if we always predicate what we do, the success of it on man, it's going to be shaky. But I always have to go back to God. So he's been working with me on, you have to undo all of this. You dated the wrong joker because you didn't ask me if that was it. Right. You're not trusting that person because you didn't ask me if you should even have a friendship. So it goes back to all the basics. And it goes back to
then knowing the fault, so we can know of him.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes back to there has to be a relationship, a true
Mm-hmm.
relationship, so everything else in my life can
Mm-hmm.
flow the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You do discuss therapy. How important was that to you?
It was important because it was a third party that I was able to talk it through.
Okay.
So I talk about the first round,
Mm-hmm.
crash and burn.
Mhm.
Okay. You know, it's like, she was like, no, I'm so sorry, I don't know it. I'm like, hey, don't call me no more. We're good. I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back to you. But I had this referral, so the last therapist I had, and I went in like, I am not going to cry. I'm just going to thug tears the whole time because I was like, you got me in here, boo. She's like, no, it's okay. So that 75 minutes per week was worth it. But I had to talk through everything that I was holding. There were some areas that I felt unfulfilled, but it was all going back to everything I had just suppressed. So for me, it's twofold. I know a lot of people, and even blacks, we say we don't do therapy, but the Bible speaks of good counsel, and so we missed that, and so it was twofold. So while I was doing the natural work, then God could do the spiritual work. But I had to have somebody that I could dump everything on that didn't know me, and I had to trust that person. So I'm big on dating the therapist, make sure it works, and I encourage you to find a Christian therapist, one who knows the Lord, because you can't go to everybody. But for me, therapy was good. Definitely needed. And so I went back to her before the book was published just to check in. She said, I think you're good. You don't have to come back this year. So it was just, she said, the person who walked in here initially is not who I'm looking at now.
Oh, wow.
And I'm able to articulate the areas that I know I have to work on, where I'm healed, where I think I'm healed, but we don't know, kind of. I'm more assured in places, and so I am a big advocate of therapy, but it also has to be twofold in your relationship with God. You can't fully rely on a therapist and you deny the Holy Spirit. It doesn't work.
It does not work that way. No. And like you said, it has to be someone that understands what you're going through. Because my thought on this is, we know that we are supposed to take things to God in prayer. But when we don't know the root, we don't know what's going on, how can you take something that you're not fully understanding to God in prayer? So I think the therapy is good because it helps you get it to see what is the root of this. Why am I responding this way? And then once you get it, it's like, all right, God, so now you have to help me. You have to help me do this. You have to help me do this. This was a great conversation. This was definitely a great conversation. So I want to ask you, so going through all of this, if you're able to, what is one thing that you learned about you? Because when we go through things, there has to be growth. There has to be awareness. So what is it one thing that you learned about you?
That I'm still good. There was
I like that.
Out of all the mistakes, whatever it was, it's still for a purpose, but I'm still good. And so now I'm at a place, even with sharing and being transparent, it's one of those, but I'm still good, and God is going to use everything. So it's more of an assurance of who I am, and not wavering on it. And now I can share more. So once you're good with yourself, the outside noise or whatever happens doesn't matter. But then now I know what I went through is not for me. And with knowing I'm good, God is like, okay, now, even when I don't want to, I got to use that, all this, to help someone else. Like, this life doesn't even belong to me. It doesn't.
Okay. And you ended the book using Romans 8:28, which is one of my favorite scriptures, and you used the New King James Version, which says, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. So the things that we go through, there is purpose for us to be who we are supposed to be using. And I like that you make it clear in the book that every experience that you went through, there was worth to every experience, because it gives us Ashley that we know today.
Everything was worth it.
Everything was worth it. So what is one thing that you would say to daughters who find themselves in a position of not having a relationship with their dad? Give one piece of advice.
I would say that even if you don't have the relationship with your father, it seems cliche, but you have a heavenly Father who is there and can send some substitutes. But once you are assured that you are a daughter that was formed in love, he chose you even before you chose him. He created you with almost this royal sense, like you are a royal daughter. So even if the earthly aspect is not there, you have a spiritual father who knows that and can still take care of you. But be assured in the posture, the position, and protection as God's daughter, where when man lets you down, you have a God who loved you so much. Even if your parents didn't plan for you, he planned for you to be here. There's still purpose, and you still have another day of breath to get it right.
Wonderful. This life is Ghetto, which is written by Miss Ashley Wood and her father Louis Wood. You want to buy this book. If you are part of a men's or women's ministry, this would be a great book as a book topic, as a part of your book club. It just shows the healing that's needed in families, and it shows the perspective of a father and daughter when their relationship is fractured, but allowing God to do the healing. So this is Dakota Kimball of A Widow's Perspective, and please join us for next time. Thank you.
So this is an excerpt from Crippled Kings written by Marquise Boone. It says, "Yes, you were dropped. Yes, you were crippled, but today God picks you up. Not only does he pick you up, but he restores you back to your position as a king. No longer will you look down on yourself and doubt and question your position because of what you have been through. You are a king and born to rule. No longer will you allow your mistakes of yesterday hold you hostage at gunpoint with the bullet of your thoughts. No longer will you sit and pretend to be perfect and secure as others struggle to be healed. At this very moment, you rise and ascend back to your kingship."
You have just listened to A Widow's Perspective podcast. Thank you for joining us this week. Follow me on Instagram at Dakota Kimball Official to connect with me and let me know your thoughts on this week's episode. Until next time.